As a writer, I always say you leave fingerprints of yourself on the page. There have been a few of my books where I've had young people asking, Mrs. Baitie, is this story about you? And I say, actually, no, it's not about me, but I'm glad you think it is because it feels so real to them. I will often create, usually for most of my main characters, I'll create a background to the character. I'll create a storyline. When were they born? What do they like to eat? That may never appear in the story, but it gives a certain depth.
Gives it context.
Yes, it does.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Against All Odds. My name is Daniel Coker, your regular host. This week, we have another special guest, a very, very, very good friend of mine, someone I've known for God knows how many years. I'm not going to betray my age, or our ages for that matter. But we have as a guest, Elizabeth-Irene Baitie. Elizabeth-Irene is an internationally renowned author. She's written a few books, which we'll come to during the conversation. And she's also the founder and the CEO of Patholab. Is it Patholab?
Patholab Solutions.
Patholab Solutions, which is a leading edge sort of laboratory testing business based in Accra, Ghana. And Elizabeth, you're welcome.
Thank you, Daniel.
Against All Odds.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
I know. We've been trying to schedule this for quite a while, actually.
We have been, and it's finally happened.
It's finally happening. It's not happened yet. It's finally happening. And before we get into the conversation, I have a confession to make, and you're not aware I was going to do this, and this is something that nobody really knows. Okay, so before we get into this episode, I'd like to bring you a message from our sponsors, Alexander Ash Limited, who are a global executive recruitment firm and are also approved diversity suppliers. And this means that they basically have preferred status for supplying diverse talents to a wide range of blue chip companies like Accenture, HSBC, Barclays, and a whole range of others. So for your next executive job, go to www.alexanderash.com. Now let's get back to this episode. You know, I've known you for quite a while.
A long time.
A very long time. And back in the day, when we were in school, I had a big crush on you.
Back when I was wearing my green uniform.
When you were in the uniform,
that was such an unattractive uniform. It's nice to know.
No, but you still look good in it.
Oh, it's nice to know that.
You still look good in it.
I hated it.
And just a handful of people know this. And it got to a stage where I actually, because back in the day we used to have these metallic trunks.
Yes, we did. The black ones with
the black ones with the whatever. So I actually scratched your initials. I knew this would make you laugh. Yeah. So it was on my trunk. EIS. Elizabeth-Irene Saki. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, but then life moved on.
Oh my goodness. That's
You're
all
shocked.
I can say.
Okay. Now let's get to the conversation. So Elizabeth, tell us a bit about your background. We always start these conversations with people's backgrounds because that sort of forms the context for who they are today. I mean, you grew up in a home, with an entrepreneurial mother, and I can't remember where your dad worked.
He worked in the bank.
Okay, yeah. So maybe just take us back into that world of the Saki home and how your upbringing perhaps might have shaped you, to become the person that you are today.
Well, as far as my entrepreneurial journey is concerned, I think that was probably formed from my earliest memories of working women. My mother worked with the Ghana Revenue Authority, and she also had a dressmaking business. She made clothes for women, for children, for pregnant moms. My mom's sister was a fashion designer, and my grandmother was an undertaker.
I know.
Quite a tough woman, quite a tough woman. And my grandmother, I credit to a large extent for the strength that I think that she gave me on my journey in life. She was a very strong woman, and believed very much in women learning to stand on their own feet and support others as well. I think from there I knew that I would always run my own business. It didn't even seem as if it would be there was any other option really. And then of course I loved to read. I was always reading. I was the sort of child who would be reading while I was supposed to be doing my chores. And I remember dusting my family. They had some treasured clock where I just dusted it up onto the floor because I was reading while I would be working. And the only thing I could ever think of doing when I was young was writing. And my dad would ply me with books. I credit him for feeding that appetite I had. I was given just about any book that I wanted, and all my family knew if you wanted to make Baba happy, get her a book. My friends in school would stop lending me their books in school because I'd be reading, boring math lesson and all that. I'd be reading under the desk, so engrossed in the story. The teacher would come and snatch the book out of my hands before I realized she was there. And nobody would see the book until the end of term. And my friends thought, don't give it to her, she'll read during school time. So largely, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I knew that I wanted to write as well. And then just finding out what to fit into what in order to make this happen was more or less a step-by-step journey along the way. My dad wanted me to do science. You know what it was like in Motown?
I was going to ask you that actually.
Yes.
I was going to ask you that because we've known each other for a very long time, and you're very clearly an art student. Very, very clearly. I mean, anybody with with any knowledge of who you are would attest to the fact that you are more inclined towards reading and things around the arts, a bit more creative sort of pursuits.
Yes.
But then you steadfastly pursued this science career, because I was a science student, and I got the impression that maybe perhaps somebody wanted you to go into medicine or go down that line. But I couldn't imagine you as a doctor.
Neither could I. It was my father's dream that I would be a doctor. That I knew I would not do. But my father had this profound longing for his daughter to do science. So you write an exam in Achimota School and you score a certain grade, and they tell you you're in the science stream. And you're quite young at the time, and you're quite malleable and open to suggestion. So my dad saying, "Oh yes, you should carry progress on a career in science." I was open to that because I had ability, but my love actually was for writing. My love was for writing, and that love never left me. So then your mind is open to the sciences, and you begin to travel that course. And I went to university, did biochemistry with chemistry, masters and all of that in that particular line, molecular biology with clinical chemistry. But even after I began running the lab, I knew that a part of me would never be fulfilled until I began writing again. It's a deep hunger. It's difficult to describe. But by that time, you begin to wonder, will I be any good as a writer? Because you've spent so much time pursuing the sciences that you wonder if there's anything of you left. And yes, you have your family telling you, oh, you're good, but you need that outside validation. And I had lots of scribbles. I was always scribbling, Daniel, but I didn't have the courage to put anything out until I had my first daughter. I had been working at the Trust Hospital, went away to have a baby, and wrote my first story and submitted it to the Balco Trust Balco Writers Award. And it won first prize back then. I thought,
Oh wow!
I thought
Okay.
myself, okay, so and that's what set me off. That helped to inject some confidence into me, because our educational system is very restricting, particularly in Ghana. I think things have changed a lot now. It's delightful to listen to children talking about their subjects and finding that somebody's doing geography, biology, and history or something, or physics, math, and drama. I would have loved to have done perhaps literature, chemistry, and biology in sixth form, but that wasn't an option for us. We had a very restricted background when it came to education, and I think to a certain extent, our educational system it beats the creativity out of you. It does. It wears it out of you, because you are forced to focus on a certain narrow range of subjects. That's something I would like to see change. But nonetheless, I found writing. Writing found me, and we're living happily ever after.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, I was a victim as well of the same educational process, and because I did science, master's chemistry, and I initially wanted to pursue a career in engineering, because that's kind of the expected thing, right? You know. But then when I failed to get into any of the Ivy League schools in America, you know, that dream came crashing, and I decided to go into to business studies, you know, which at the time was very strange. You know, why would somebody who was pursuing a career path in science suddenly switch to the arts? And I mean, you've got to think broadly, you know, and
it was quite a brave decision of yours, I think.
Well, my brother had kind of done something similar before, so I had, you know, there was a guinea pig there.
A path had been carved.
A path had been carved, you know, and when I did it, people like Asmani, who's now the CEO of Stanbic, he did the same thing, because back in the day, it wasn't a dumb thing, you know, but he tells me that when he saw me do what I did, he said, no, I'll do the same.
It's so important, isn't it, to be able to see somebody do what you would like to do. It just opens up possibilities for you.
Yeah. You know, and that's kind of why we're doing this podcast, because we're capturing stories of people who have done unusual things. That's why it's called Against All Odds, because like I said, knowing you and knowing your background and knowing your story, you know, to find yourself having gone full circle, and now you've come back to your true passion of being an author, but then behind you, you've also got the business which kind of supports you. You provide employment for people and all that. Okay, so just take me back to, let's just go back to you starting out as an entrepreneur. Okay, because I didn't even know you worked at Trust Hospital. That shows how long we sort of went on different paths. At what stage did you decide that it was now time for you to venture into the space of business and specifically medical laboratories?
I think that was something I had decided to myself, because as I mentioned, I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. As I progressed along the path of science, I began to wonder whether I could actually make a living as a writer. So I was thinking quite hard, what can I do outside being a doctor, which my dad wanted and which I didn't want? What could I do to make a living as an entrepreneur? And I began thinking about, I was doing biochemistry, and I began thinking about a diagnostic laboratory. And I loved that idea, because I'm very much a people person. So I knew that whatever job that path that I embarked on, I would like to interact with people, and my job gives me ample opportunity for that, because we also do a lot of corporate wellness work. So I'm constantly running wellness seminars and health screens and so forth. It gives me a wonderful opportunity to interact with people about various aspects of health and what to do to achieve optimal health. So that's a big part of me fulfilled. That part of me, as you know, that likes being with people, that likes having conversations. Yes. So quite early, probably by the time I was in second year, I knew that I was going to run a medical laboratory. And the women in my family were all business women. So as we mentioned before, having somebody before you carve a path makes such a difference. I'm not sure whether I'd have done things this way if I didn't have the example of those women before.
Okay, and what was it like for you when COVID hit? Did you make a lot of money during COVID?
No, I didn't. I didn't. I'd like to, give a shout out to the Zomalos, my friends, the Zomalos, Michael and Pamela, fantastic pair, extremely enterprising, because I was sitting on the fence when it came to COVID. COVID was a very scary time. I wondered, how long is this virus going to last? Actually, I didn't think it was going to last that long. I thought it was going to be 4 months, 5 months, or maybe up to about a year. And I was thinking about all the investment that was going into PCR testing, and I was being very cautious about expenditure at the time. There were some facilities available. I remember Standard Chartered was offering a facility for medical laboratories that wanted to go into COVID testing, take a loan of X number of thousands of dollars and pay back over 2 years. But I'm also very cautious and hesitant when it comes to taking loans. I think that's something I need to be a bit braver about, stepping out, taking what's available and using it responsibly. Yes. So no, I didn't. I just stuck with the rapid test and so forth. But I saw other people quickly open up medical laboratories and do very, very, very well indeed. So no, I didn't make a lot of money doing COVID.
Missed opportunity,
I
guess.
Yes, it was it was a good lesson.
Yeah,
it was a good lesson.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Who dares wins.
Yeah. So, onto your writing. How do you get a storyline? Because your first book, I think, was about a little girl who. Maybe just tell us a bit about the story,
Yes.
but then how did that storyline come about, and what inspired you? Before, what inspires you to write about certain things?
Largely people, Daniel. People are fascinating. People are exciting. There's a wealth of material hidden within people. I could have a conversation with you and the seed for a story will start. I could read something in the newspaper. I could hear something on the radio. It's very rare. I have 8 published books to date, and it's very rare for me to start a story without a seed from something that actually happened. So with my very first story, A Saint in Brown Sandals, that won the Macmillan Writers' Prize for Africa in 2006. It was a big thing for me. Previously, I mentioned a short story I had submitted for the Valco, the Valco Writers. That's right. And this Macmillan Writers' Prize was out there as well. So I wrote a story for it, which was shortlisted. That was another boost of confidence. Then following year, I wrote another story about a little girl. The title was A Saint in Brown Sandals. That won the award. And it was inspired to a certain extent by my daughter, my first daughter, Alia. The storyline itself is quite unrelated to anything in my daughter's life, but the seed was planted by something my daughter had said, because she was a quiet child, very different from her mother. She's not quiet now, by the way. She was a quiet child, and I remembered her telling me once that when she was in a group of friends, she wouldn't say anything because she didn't know whether anybody was interested in what she had to say. So then I began thinking about children who wanted to fit in and so forth, and then I just wove the story. So there's always a little seed of something planted by something somebody said, and then the story weaves itself around it. And this was about a girl who wanted to be friends with one of the most popular girls in school. And then, of course, you draw on your own background stories that other people told. And if you're like me and you're constantly speaking to people, oh my goodness, you have more than enough fodder to weave your stories with. I write down ideas. I keep saying ideas are like feathers. If you don't write them down, they fly away. And sometimes I have so many that I have to actually begin to edit. And that's a big thing when it comes to writing as well, because if you have too much material, you may end up with a story that's too bulky for your target reader. So constantly telling myself, no, okay, take this out. It's going to be for another story. Yeah, so largely the ideas come from people.
So when you're writing a story, do you have an end in mind?
Always.
Oh, okay.
Always. I start with the end in mind. I always know how the story is going to end, without fail. Beginnings are difficult for me. Beginnings are tough. I keep writing and rewriting the beginnings and not being happy with it and thinking, this is starting off weakly, because you'd like to grip your reader from the beginning. There's so much out there to attract a reader. There's so much on Netflix and on their phones and social media and so forth. Why would anybody read beyond your first line? So beginnings are important. But that I think I struggle far more with beginnings than with endings. The ending is always wrapped up.
Okay.
Oh yeah, endings are always wrapped up. I know those. Beginnings and titles. I struggle with titles as well.
Okay. Yeah, we struggle with titles for our thumbnails, because obviously the podcast space is a pretty crowded space, and for people to want to click on a thumbnail, something has to intrigue them, So it's a constant battle trying to think of something that will pique somebody's interest enough for them to want to get into the conversation.
Absolutely. So with what I'm working on now, I've got the end. I love the ending. I mean, one of the stories I wrote, the 12 Hearts, I was just weeping at the end of it. Starting off, it's a little tricky, but the end, I thought this is such a beautiful ending. And my readers confirm that, because time after time after time, my readers are like, oh, Mrs. Baitie, the end. And it's a little tragic. And I found myself crying at the end of the story. And as a writer, you need to be moved by what you're writing, because if you're writing something and you don't chuckle at the funny parts yourself, or you don't teary at the sad parts, then how can you expect your reader to be moved emotionally? So for me, that's a gauge. If I feel what I'm writing, then I know my reader will feel it as well. And with the 12 Hearts, the ending of that, I was weeping copiously over my laptop, and my husband was asking me, why are you crying? You're writing the story, just change it, making a happy ending. I said, no, it's destined, it is written. This is how it's going to end. I just take out my tissues and blow my nose.
Wow. It's interesting that you get so immersed in your writing. Now, in terms of time management, because I know it's one thing running a business, because you've got employees, you've got clients, you're doing wellness seminars, corporate wellness seminars, and you're traveling all over the world. How do you find time to write?
Then I do. Can you see the bags under my eyes? It's tough, Daniel. It's tough. And increasingly, over the last couple of years, we all know what the economic situation in Ghana is like. So keeping a business afloat is a huge challenge. It takes up a lot of my mental space. And at the same time, I am writing, and I've been given by God this valuable opportunity, because I have an agent through whom I'm now internationally published, and I want to make the most of that opportunity I have with her. My agent's name is Sarah. I'll tell you a little bit about that.
Sure.
That, I believe, was just God working. God just works so wonderfully for us. When you want something and it's good for you, God gives it to you. Yeah. But back to your question, it's tough, Daniel. It's really tough. I often wake up at dawn. Dawn is special to me. It's a time of being quiet. It's a time of listening to what God has to say to me. Time was when I'd wake up in the morning and be babbling on my prayers, which I still do to a certain extent. But largely, I also want to make that quiet space to listen to God. And that time of the morning is also the morning when I'm most likely to have an aha moment when it comes to my writing. So I will scribble down creative ideas. I won't do any actual proper writing. I just scribble down creative ideas. Don't edit anything. Just let it come out. And then when I get home from work in the evening, I will write. So typically I start writing at about 7:30 p.m. and I'm usually tired. But I ask myself, if I don't write it, who will? The book will not write itself. So it's tough. There's nothing easy about it. It is tough. And the book that I'm writing now, I told my agents would be ready in June, and I've been pushing the date since then, and it's supposed to be ready in December, and I'm thinking, it's probably more likely to be January. It's tough. Yes, and it requires a lot of discipline. It requires, like I said, you know me, constantly on the phone, out at a party. It requires sacrifice. Put the phone away, put it in another room, so I can focus and just get my writing done.
Do you ever get writer's block?
Never.
Wow.
I've heard of writer's block, and I think I can understand what writer's block is. But as I told you, I half the time my problem is, okay, there's too much information, and there's too much going on in the story, and you've over-egged the pudding, it's too rich, you need to take some stuff out. So no, Daniel, I've never had writer's block.
That's amazing.
I've heard of it a lot, but
yeah. Because, sometimes you go through moments of inspiration where it's just like everything's just coming out, and other times it's just, normally you have that with people in the creative industry, where like musicians and stuff like that, they release a hit song or whatever it is, and then it takes them years for them to be able to come up with something again, because as you rightly said, the people who resonate most with what you're putting out there, will feel you through whatever you're doing, and if they're not feeling you, it's not going to have that impact, if that makes sense.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
you almost have to be very authentic to your true self.
You have to be. You have to be. I mean, as a writer, I always say you leave fingerprints of yourself on the page. There've been a few of my books where I've had young people asking, Mrs. Baitie, is this story about you? And I say, actually, no, it's not about me, but I'm glad you think it is because it feels so real to them. I will often create, usually for most of my main characters, I'll create a background to the character. I'll create a storyline. When were they born? What do they like to eat? That may never appear in the story, but it gives a certain depth.
Gives it context.
Yes, it does. And then I'll write little things like, okay, if they were running for the bus and somebody got there ahead of them, what would they do? Would they push the person out of the way? Would they jump on the bus themselves? Just to help me understand the person better. And then when you're writing about it, it just flows and the person just seems a lot more lifelike. It's a fair bit of homework to do before before the story, but it does help. And it helps you not to get stuck because by the time you're writing, you know your characters, you know what they would do in all sorts of circumstances and situations that will not arise in the book, but it enables you to write about them smoothly.
Did you have any mentors in the writing space? Because I haven't heard you kind of mention anyone that's perhaps guided you and said, no, do it like this, structure it like this? Or would you say that your experience of reading over the years kind of gave you a framework?
Thanks,
that
Daniel.
kind of.
Yes, I think that it's largely that. I was a voracious reader, yes. So I think that formed the foundation for me. That said, right now I've got a wonderful editor, Helen. She is absolutely wonderful. I mentioned my agent, so let me
tell us about Sarah and Helen as well.
So I had, by the time I released my second book, The 12th Heart, which did very well and currently has sold over 100,000 copies, I wanted an agent, and so I began writing letters. And a literary agent would present your book to publishers and get a market for you, not just in your country but internationally. So I really wanted that. And after The 12th Heart, I wrote letter after letter after letter. I should come and tell you a bit about The 12th Heart as well, but that's a different story. I wrote letter after letter. I must have written about 40 letters to agents asking if they would represent me. And they would often ask me, I had written a third story, and they would often ask me to send a sample of my work, which I did, and I would get feedback as, okay, this is well written, but we're not looking for anything like this at the moment, and so forth. And after a while, I gave up. I thought to myself, you know what, just keep writing. So I wrote a third story, a fourth story, a fifth story, a sixth story, and by this time...
Were you self-publishing?
No, I wasn't. I have a publisher in Ghana. This was Quidron. The 12th Heart, Saint in Brown Sandals was published by Macmillan, and then The 12th Heart, which was my second story, was published by Quidron, which is a large publishing company in Ghana. And Quidron then went on to publish 4 more. The 12th Heart won an award, as did the subsequent ones, and Quidron was publishing all those. So by the time Quidron had published my 4th book with them, which was the 5th book I had written, I get an email one day, and it's a lovely email, simple. The lady says, "Hi Elizabeth, this is Sarah. I would like to meet you. I'm coming to Ghana. I'm interested in stories from Ghana, interested in carrying them around the world. Can I meet you?" And I thought to myself, absolutely. So I meet her. She comes to Ghana. I meet with her at the British Council. We have a lovely conversation. And she asked me to write something for her for a magazine. And I think, yes, I'll do that. And that's a back and forth conversation. And then she's coming to Ghana again the following year to run a workshop. And she says she would like me to be at that workshop. And she'd like me to register for the workshop. So I go on and I register for the workshop. And when I'm registering for the workshop, I read her background, which I hadn't done before. I just knew I was dealing with a lady called Sarah. And I suddenly find that I'm dealing with a lady who oversaw the publication of all the Harry Potter novels.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my days.
So she comes to Ghana and she says, "I'd like to sign you up." And so then Sarah is my agent.
Wow.
So the first book I write, it was unbelievable. It's just literally out of the blue.
Wow.
So Sarah represents me. Crossing the Stream is the first book I published with her. Crossing the Stream is published now in the US, in Brazil, in the UK, in Italy, in Ghana, and in Nigeria. So that's 6 countries so far. And a second novel has come out, Flying Up the Mountain, and that's also doing quite well. So it's just wonderful to see how it happened on my blind side.
It's quite interesting. that as you face rejection, from all the people that you had written to, when your time came, I mean, you persisted, and when your time came, everything kind of fell into place.
Everything.
It's almost as if life tests you, isn't it?
I think so.
Because you go through moments of, is anyone going to notice me?
Yes.
We started this podcast, like I said, by chance, and you get high moments, you get low moments, and we're definitely not where we want to be. We're still pushing and pressing, and you can't help sometimes, but you can't help sometimes just wishing that somebody out there would notice you and take it to the next level, and sometimes just kind of thinking,
I know.
I know.
And God works. I remember there's this passage I read by Oswald Chambers where he said, leave God room to operate, because you don't know whether he's going to come on your left, your right, before, behind. And in the meantime, while you're giving God room to operate, you just need to keep doing what you're doing.
Perfecting your craft.
Exactly. Keep giving of your best all the time. Because honestly, I had dropped it from my mind, getting an agent. I just thought, let me just focus on writing good stories. And by the time Sarah contacted me, she had heard about my writing. And that's because I had continued to write even after the rejection I had received several years before. So it was quite a profound lesson for me that, just keep going. And even now, we keep facing situations where we wonder, are things going to be all right? Are things going to be better? And then you remember those Ebenezer stones, as I like to call them. His love in time past forbids me to think he'll leave me at last. So then you keep, it's good encouragement. When something like this comes through, then you know that even on the dreary days, just keep pushing. God will come through for you.
Right, tell us about Helen as well, because you've got an editor, you said.
Yes. That has been one of the most marvelous experiences for me, working with Helen. The very first story I wrote with Sarah, Crossing the Stream, I thought was a pretty decent story, and was given to Helen, the editor. Her name is Helen Thomas. Helen comes back to me with 13 pages of notes. And I realized we're not talking about revision, we are talking about a rewrite.
Wow.
Yes. Wow. And I just took a deep breath and plunged into it. It took me a few more months to rewrite the story, but it came out so much better than before. And this is the first time I had worked with an editor who helped me see how much better the story could be, helped me take the story to another level. And it's given me a deep appreciation of the value of good editorial support. And that's something that I hope any writer out there, because very often you write something and you think it's good, you think it's fine, and you put it out there. But my advice to any writer would be, get yourself a good editor. As I read the story as it is now, I think, wow,
that's
I
good.
Like
I guess it boils down to a principle that I live by. One of my values is that if you're doing anything, do it properly. Don't do things in halves. And I mean, what would you say to somebody who's watching this and is thinking of pursuing some career? I mean, maybe you even work in the workplace, you work for somebody else, but that who doesn't have this mindset of doing things and doing them well, so they just kind of do things haphazardly, do things half-heartedly, just to get by. And
you know what? I think that, yes, there are, I'm sure, a good number of people who do things haphazardly, but there are also a good number of people who are putting out their best. But then how do you know how good your best is unless you've had somebody look over what you're doing? Critique it. So I have come to value working with people who know more than you do. Very, very, very often it feels good to be in a situation where you are the top dog, but you realize that having somebody who can help hold your hand and tell you, you know something, take a look at this, this could be that instead, suddenly opens up your perception of what things could be. So for anybody out there, I would say there are other people who know more than you do. It's a good idea to interact with them, tap into their knowledge, tap into their experience. When I was running the lab, for example, I came from a clinical chemistry background, and the laboratory obviously is several disciplines, hematology and microbiology and so forth. So I had to quickly engage people who knew a lot more about these disciplines than I do. And as the laboratory has grown, I found that initially you start off a business and you're 1,000. You are HR, you are admin, you are marketer, you are CEO, you are everything. But with time, you find out, you need an HR consultant. I need somebody to help with accounts. I need, so then, and then being willing to let go and let people who are good at what they do what they do, and not micromanage, which tends to be a habit of mine. But I'm letting go of that. You see. So yes, I would say engage with people who know more than you do. You see.
One thing about you as well that I know is that you have a very solid network. You have people like Abner Sepoku. I heard you met with Yao and Sako, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday.
Yes, we did.
You hang around with the Zomilos. You've got a very solid network of high achieving people around you. Would you say that there are lessons or there's some kind of energy, or do you get some vibe by hanging around these type of people?
You can tell from the look on my face that is a resounding yes. As I just mentioned, hang around with people who know more than you do. They always help you take it to another level. And it could be in terms of your faith. It could be in terms of your relationships. It could be in terms of maybe your writing or your business. They will always help you see that, I could be doing a lot better than I'm doing now. People have so much to teach us. So long as we are receptive to that, I think the power of our network is really critical in helping to take us to another level. Yeah. So it's not just having those connections for whatever it is that it can bring to you, but just as your own growth and development. And then you in turn obviously will be that person to somebody else.
Fantastic. In terms of the future, what are your plans for the next 6 to 8 months, in terms of your literary career?
Well, I just mentioned the overdue deadline, so that's pending. Work is quite busy as well because we are opening a new branch in Kwabinya, so it's going to be very busy. And I will admit, I get moments of anxiety, where I wake up in the morning feeling a bit panicky about what needs to be done. But one learns to calm down, breathe, trust in a God who will help you, trust in the people around you who will work with you to get you there, and learning to take things a day at a time. So yes, opening a new branch, getting my book on time, out on time, that's for the immediate future.
Another thing I know about you as well is that you tend to make the most of whatever time you have. And the reason I say that is I've spoken to you several times in the past where you're stuck in traffic and you let your driver drive and you get out and do your exercise, just walk for miles and miles and miles, and I find that really, 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 very inspiring. The fact that you would even think that way, because somebody would just sit in the air condition and just fuss or do this or do that, but you kind of think, no, I could get out and walk and get my physical, exercise as well done.
Yes.
Whilst I'm faced with this inevitability of traffic not moving.
Yes. Yeah. I definitely believe in maximizing every opportunity that you have. Life is passing you by, or rather life is passing by whether you maximize the time or not. So just seeing what can be done to make the most out of every moment it's a big thing with me. So yes, I will. I've had a driver for many years. Having a driver has its pluses and minuses. One has to be very cautious with one's conversations, for example. Because many drivers are not known for their discretion. But yes, it gives me a good opportunity to do a wonderful walk. And while I'm doing a walk, I can have those confidential conversations as well. It also gives me a chance to do some writing if I need to in the car. So yes, I tend to like to be able to do two things at once. Maybe that's not always a good thing, because sometimes one needs to just power down and just be. That's something I'm learning to sometimes just be still. It doesn't come naturally to me.
How do you balance, because obviously you're married, how do you balance the demands on your time as a writer, as an entrepreneur, business owner, as a speaker, how do you balance all of that with your family life?
Yeah, that's a good question you ask. Right from the beginning, I realized I needed to create time, and I'd like to give a shout out as well to Nana Oye, Keke Uso's mom. Soon after I got married, she met me and she said to me in a queer which I shall not attempt to replicate because there's no way I can speak as beautifully as she does. But she said, young lady, try and when you earn some money, try and give some of that money to somebody to buy yourself some time in order to do the things that you would like to do. And so right from the beginning, I would have house help. I had two house help when my kids were younger because just keeping home and all of that, looking after young children and spending time with your husband. It's difficult to do all of that if you're coming home from a full-time job, do the cooking, take care of the children, clean the house, spend time with your husband, and still write. So it's something that
Something has to give.
Something has to give. And when I speak to young women, I tell them, get help when you can. Get help. Take as much help as is out there. Take it gratefully, and you offer help to others as well. So I've always operated on that. Which is one of the reasons why I'll use a driver. I'll have house help. I'll have a gardener. I'll have just about anybody I can have to help me, and that helps to free up some time. When I come home in the evening, for example, I will make it a point to sit down with my husband and have a conversation, maybe about half an hour. I wish it could be longer, but then beyond that, I'll probably start yawning and go to bed. And the book has to be written. So I will do that. I will have that conversation. Sometimes it's tempting to rush home, oh, hi, sweetheart, and then go straight to my laptop. But no, I don't think that's a good idea. I wouldn't advise that because husbands need attention as well.
Another thing I've recently found out about you is your passion for musicals. I got treated to a musical a few weeks ago for my birthday. Shout out one of our subscribers who I'll call 1M. The person knows who they are. I won't reveal their identity. But I got a treat from 1M to go and watch Mrs. Doubtfire in the West End, and it was pretty amazing. And then I speak to you as well, trying to schedule this chat, and it's like the main reason why you're here in our part on our shows is to come and watch a musical.
Yes, Jesus Christ Superstar, which I wanted to watch since I was a child. Yes, wow. I actually love theatre. Okay. I love theatre, and we, to a certain extent, we have a little in Ghana. Shout out to Uncle Ebo White. He's quite consistent, and Fifi Coleman is also doing a good job. But we don't have anything that can compare to the variety of shows that one can find in London and the UK. So whenever I come to the UK, one of my highlights, go see a show. So yes, I've watched a good number and I find them so inspirational. Daniel, each night these performers come out and they give it 100%. And each night you watch it, it's as if the show is running for the very first time. And yet it could have been running for years. I mean, Les Mis and some of these other musicals have been running for so many years, and they keep going and they keep giving it their best every night. And I come away feeling awed, feeling inspired, and feeling encouraged to keep putting out my best time after time. I love the art scene in London and in the UK.
Fantastic.
I absolutely love it.
Fantastic. As we wrap up this chat, what inspires you?
What inspires me so much. But I think people who share and people who care, people who take time out from themselves, because everybody is busy. Everybody could focus on themselves, and yet you have people who step out time after time to extend a hand of help to other people. And it could be just a word of encouragement. It could just be a word of support. I'm constantly encouraged and inspired by people who put themselves out for others. And it makes me hope that I can do the same. I hope that to a certain extent I do that, but there's always room to grow. So yes, extending that hand out. I feel that along life's journey, we all need to look back and tell people, come this way, step there. This is where I fell. This is where I stumbled. So step here instead. So you're just looking back, calling back, and encouraging other people along.
Fantastic. What do you think about this podcast and what we're trying to do?
I love it. I feel that, as I mentioned to you, you need to have people you need to see that people have carved a way, and then you find it's encouraging. There are some people who are the trailblazers. There are some people who are the pioneers. They go where no man has been before. You see, but that's only a handful. Most people are followers. So seeing or listening, hearing that somebody has done something, then inspires so many people to then step up to do things which they might not have had the courage to have done before, or it just encourages people to keep doing what they're doing, knowing that there's a breakthrough waiting for them. So congratulations, Daniel. These stories need to be told. We need to hear stories.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that feedback. We have a tradition on this podcast where we give our guests an opportunity to dedicate the episode that they feature on to anyone or any group of people of their choice. I know you're not expecting that, but who would you like to dedicate this podcast to?
This goes out to my husband, Rami. We've been talking a lot about writing, and Rami has been such a solid supporter of my writing. He promotes my writing to people single-handedly as an individual outside, my publisher and my agent. I think he has promoted my books, most. He is an enthusiastic reader, and he will always read my stories before they get to the editorial stage. He'll give me honest feedback, and he's been along with me on my life's journey for so many years. I would like to dedicate this to Rami.
Shout out, Rami. And on that note, I'd like to say a very big thank you to you for making time out of your busy schedule. I know you're traveling in a few hours. Mm-hmm. You made time out to come and sit with us in our studio. And for this, we're really, really grateful. Where can people get your books if they want to? Because we'll have a thing in the comment section below where people can find out a bit more about you if they want. But then also would like to give them the option to buy your books if possible. So is there a way that we'll be able to get some of the titles you've written? And
yes, my books are, if you just search Elizabeth-Irene Baitie, my books are available on Amazon and Target. And for those who are in Ghana, they're available in like EPP and so forth, but online they can be found on Amazon. Not all of them, I think. Some of the earlier ones perhaps not, but most of them.
So just search by title, and they'll be able to find them.
Yes.
Okay. Elizabeth-Irene, on that note, once again, thank you very much. And to all our viewers, if you've enjoyed this episode, I'd like you to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and help us to build this community. You have no idea what it takes to get guests in that chair. It's a nightmare. It's not easy. But what you can do to help us, because the bigger the platform grows, the easier it will be to get people to come and talk and share their stories with you. And on that note, have a great week, and see you same time next week. Thank you. We did it.
Well done. I love camera now.